One of the other things that blended teaching has done in my classroom is that it's enabled me to teach my students, to train my students about authentic conversations and feedback. I've trained my students to be resources to each other as co-learners and as a community of learners, to be able to support each other when they need it. You know, one of the things we know about feedback is that it really does have to be timely, and it has to come from someone that you trust. You know, we've all been in situations where someone has offered us feedback when we didn't want it, or from someone we didn't trust. You know, maybe it's after you changed lanes without your signal and the other car on the road decided to give you some feedback on that. We need to work on that with our students. And through blended teaching, we're able to leverage all kinds of resources online to empower them to do this. Some of the training that my students go through in 7th grade as soon as they come in is I need to train them how to set themselves up for success. So one of our early learning targets is how to enter a classroom. And one of those things is they need to log into our learning management system, our LMS. In my district, it's Skyward, and they use Skyward to check their grades to see what they're missing. So every day when my students come in, they open Skyward and they see where they're at, not just in my class, but in other classes. And that way they inform themselves and they're able to make a plan. The second thing my students log into when they come into the classroom is Gmail. They log into their student email accounts to see if there's any information they need to get there from their fellow students, from their teachers, from our school, whatever it might be. They need to be able to find that. So using our virtual classroom environment, my students are trained how to respond to one another and how to give each other help in the classroom. You know, one of the things that happened just this year is that I had provided a resource to my students in the classroom, and I linked to it on the virtual classroom environment. And one of my students had lost theirs and they couldn't find it on the virtual classroom, so they posted a comment to their whole class and said, "Hey, I'm having a really hard time finding this story." And before I got to it, before I had a chance to respond, and I probably would have said something like, "Oh, it's linked to module 2 under this page," or something like that. Another student in the classroom actually posted the story in the comment. Said, "Hey, yes, it's logged in module 2, but here's a link to it right here." And the student was able to provide a link immediately where the other student had requested it. And that kind of thing happens in real life, but we block it in virtual teaching environments. We tell students, sit down and don't talk to each other. But there's no reason a student couldn't grab a copy of the story and deliver it to another student in the classroom. And now that's available virtually too when they're not in the classroom. It's one of the things that's very important is that the learning can't stop at my classroom door. It has to persist beyond that. And this community of learners has to exist outside of my classroom, because these students think of these ideas and they process this learning at home with their friends. And using blended teaching, I'm able to allow those conversations to persist outside of the classroom. If a student turns something into me and it sits in my basket until I get around to grading it, and then I grade it and I give it back to the student, that learning has stayed with me the whole time it's been in my room. Where if it's online and I allow students to view each other's work and to comment on each other's work, that work stays with the student anytime they want to find it. It's in their virtual pocket and they can call it out whenever they want. They can refer to examples from other students on demand, and that's powerful. The other thing that has to go into place with this is students need to be trained how to give good feedback. One of the resources I've found online is a video called Austin's Butterfly, and I train all of my 7th graders using this Austin's Butterfly video, and that training persists through 8th and 9th grade. Basically, the premise of the video is that there's this teacher of young students, probably 2nd or 3rd grade, and he's challenged them to draw a scientific drawing of a butterfly. And he puts one example in front of the class, and he puts the reference photo in front of the class, and he asks them how the student did, and they all say he did so good. And then he asks them, well, what could he have done better? And he gets authentic feedback from these 2nd or 3rd graders about what Austin could have done better. And so he takes their feedback, and Austin does better using the feedback, and he shows them the second drawing. And these students are so impressed with Austin's progress, but by the 3rd or 4th drawing, this butterfly resembles the scientific photograph that was taken. And it's impressive that this 2nd or 3rd grade student was able to produce such a high quality drawing, but it was all based on the feedback. So I work with my students to understand butterfly feedback, and that's the term we use for it, and we discuss it, and students know that if they're going to give feedback, it has to be helpful, meaning that it needs to give the student something they can do to improve their work. It has to be specific, They have to talk exactly what the student can do to improve. And then it has to be kind. One of the things we train is the passive voice. We train them not to say your essay. We train them to say this essay needs. And we work that way. So using a blended teaching environment, I'm able to leverage 39 other voices in my classrooms to help every single student and to make this community of learners persist beyond my classroom door.